Welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host, Joy Vaterbeck, and back with me is our senior analyst, Lauren Sanford.
Glad to be here, Joy.
Thank you, Larry. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Today we are going to talk about the recent Hezbollah-Israeli ceasefire brokered by the U.S. and what it means for the Middle East, Hamas, the hostages, and Iran. Mm-hmm. So please check out our website at www.ascf.us. You can sign up for our newsletter and receive notices of our upcoming webinars, as well as our podcast and articles. Larry, a 60-day ceasefire went into effect this morning, actually, at 4 a.m., and today is Wednesday, November 27th, 2024. The day is pretty much over for Israel and Lebanon, and so far, the ceasefire seems to have stuck with maybe a little minor suspicious activity. But I want to approach it from UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, as they're tasked with helping, I believe, the Lebanese forces keep Hezbollah from breaking the ceasefire agreement and weapons being smuggled in. Mm-hmm. Larry, seeing what happened with the UNRWA in Gaza, do you think we can trust UNIFIL in Lebanon to not turn a blind eye to Hezbollah's activities?
That is a multifaceted question, Joy. UNRWA is the United Nations Relief Work Agency devoted solely to Palestinians. It's the only agency within the United Nations Charter that's so designated, and frankly it should be folded because it's just rife with Palestinian Hamas and who knows what else, Islamic terrorist groups within UNRWA, and they're blatantly anti-West, anti-America, anti-Israel. So to equate UNIFIL with UNRWA, I'd say that UNIFIL failed miserably in its original duties. It was originally formed to separate South Lebanon Hezbollah forces from Israel. And we now know, since this current conflict in South Lebanon, that when Israel went in there, they found bunkers and tunnels being built right next door to UNIFIL positions that were supposedly there to prevent Hezbollah from building up military. So to put trust in an agreement with UNIFIL or with Hamas or UNRWA, I don't put much credence. But that doesn't mean a ceasefire won't hold for a while, because I think it's in both parties' interest. I think Israel has got its hands full still with the Hamas situation down in Gaza. Hezbollah has had its leadership decimated and its military pretty well damaged by the Israeli airstrikes and other events going on. And I think maybe, just hopefully, the Lebanese, other than Hezbollah, have said enough is enough. Let's see if we can make a deal to stop the bombing of Beirut and stop the fighting and people getting killed and the economy just being decimated as far as shipments and so forth. So to answer your question, I don't trust anybody from UNIFIL, UN, or Hamas. But as long as it's in the interest of Israelis and the other parties, the ceasefire will hold for a while. I mean, it's a grand tradition of Islam that they make a treaty, they make a deal until circumstances change to be more favorable of their circumstances. And then they'll go ahead and break the deal without batting an eye. I mean, it's in the Quran where Muhammad made a deal, and then when things changed, he broke the deal. And so it's in a grand tradition. So, but we shouldn't be too high on our horse. We've perhaps done a few of those too.
Perhaps. And that leads me into the next part, my question here, as far as you answered, will the ceasefire last? Yes, it may hold for 60 days.
Yeah, that's what they're talking about, 60 days, yeah.
Now, in that time period, of course, Hezbollah has a chance to rebuild, so does Israel. But it looks like Israel may turn all their sights on Gaza. Do you think they will hammer Hamas until they get the hostages home?
Well, the United States has put some pressure on Israel in the sense they've been withholding munitions so that they make it difficult for Israel to wage a two-front war, namely in Gaza and in Lebanon. And so this will give them time to rebuild and have Biden go out on his side. And maybe he'll start renewing the shipments. I'm pretty confident that Trump will renew the shipments anyways in 60 days. So I'm not sure what else you can predict other than the fact that right now it's in everybody's interest for a ceasefire in Lebanon, South Lebanon.
Yes, yes. And how about a ceasefire with Hamas? Do you think that would ever happen?
Well, the war in Gaza with Hamas could end tomorrow if they release the hostages. Supposedly 100 are still alive. I wouldn't bet there's 100 still left. And it's in their interest to keep on going. I don't know how much more fighting will occur in Gaza. It seems to me like Israel's dominated Gaza pretty much. So, but they're still firing rockets, and the citizens. I guess it's going to be when the citizens turn against Hamas. And that's easier said than done because Hamas has the guns. So until Hamas doesn't have the guns, they can fight indefinitely, a guerrilla war. But it's in Israel's interest to stop the fighting too because of all the worldwide condemnation.
Yes, yes.
So,
and the home front's getting a little tired of the war.
Yeah, plus it's a strain on the army and everything else, yes.
Yes, they were having problems, I think, with their own country getting troops.
Yep.
So they could use some downtime.
Well, there's the Orthodox Jews in Israel that aren't part of the military conscription system. So they represent roughly 10% of the population. And so the government is trying to force them to be participating in the defense of Israel, and they're encountering resistance on that score. So
yes, I did hear that. And on the Iranian front, do you think there'll be any more engagement there with Israel?
Again, right now it's in everyone's interest that there be no more shooting right now. Who knows down the road? I mean, until there's a change in Iranian leadership, they're the head of the snake.
Yes.
And the snake has many heads, which includes Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, Islamic terrorists, and so forth. And Hezbollah is in South Lebanon, but they're also in Africa and in South America. There are more Lebanese overseas than there are Lebanese in Lebanon. And they control crime syndicates, drug trafficking. So Hezbollah not only gets millions of dollars from Iran, but they get millions and millions of dollars from drug trafficking in Africa and South America, or gems. They're big into the jewelry gemstone business in Africa. So they're a multifaceted organization. It's based on Lebanese who are Shia, who emigrated out of Lebanon, and they concentrated in South America and Brazil. And it's a major problem in Brazil, for example, with all the crimes. They're big crime syndicates. Argentina, they blew up a Jewish synagogue 20 years ago, killed a number of people. And they're in the tri-state area of Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. So illicit drugs, trading, who knows what else, money laundering, they're in there. So Hezbollah is, and of course they're friends of Venezuela. Venezuela loves organizations that are
and they pushed their way all the way up to the Mexican drug cartel as well, so they're very close to home.
And there was an article, I think it was today or yesterday, in the Wall Street Journal about describing how these terrorist groups are now hiring gangs, like the Hezbollah is hiring gangs in South America to do their dirty work. So not only do you have the Hezbollah, members of Hezbollah, but you have their contractors, the developing contractors. So it's something that countries have to address. It just seems like they're coming at you at all angles. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. In 60 days, we'll have a new administration, so we'll see how that plays out as well.
You can only do so much. The U.S. is not going to send troops into Paraguay to get rid of Hezbollah. So the countries themselves, and Argentina is flipped into America's interest. So the U.S. has got to just work with allies and help them fight the gangs and these terrorist groups.
then that brings me to my peace through strength strategy here is, and that really more of a question is, could we see Saudi Arabia be a key player for peace in the Middle East?
They certainly can be, and they're certainly modernizing. In the last 6 or 7 years, they've really loosened the reins. There's no more morality priest patrols in the streets checking out on how women are dressed and whether they're being accompanied by a man, and women can drive a car now. So there's all sorts of modernization going on. But you have to remember, Saudi Arabia is an autocratic state. But it's in their interest to be on our side and China's side, because Shia Iran is diametrically opposed in theology to Sunni Saudi Arabia. So they'll kill each other without batting an eye. But when it comes to the great Satan, the United States and the West, sometimes they can get together. So
and Iran and Saudi have been working a little more together lately. So they put their differences aside, including the Houthi in Yemen situation with Saudi.
So I'm still basically an optimist. I would like to think that Saudis will continue to modernize and respect women and respect the rights of individuals, but they're still autocratics. And as we've discussed many times before, the big difference between totalitarianism and Western democracy is the value of a human versus the value to the state. And Saudi Arabia is sort of in the middle right now. Iran is ruled by mullahs, and the head guy apparently might have some health issues. But you hear the same thing about Putin. And let's face it, we're all going to end up in the same place. It's only a question of when and how. So.
And we've also talked about the Iranian people all having to rise up against the Ayatollah themselves. So
it's harder now for people to rise up with modern technologies. Everybody's buying Chinese surveillance cameras, and the Venezuelans, for example, they make no bones about all the surveillance cameras, and they're in bed with the Cuban intelligence. So it's much harder in today's world, I think, to have an uprising of the population. So it's gonna be the corruption within the ruling class that says enough is enough. But we'll see. Things change. I never thought the Soviet Union would disappear the way it did either. So let's hope China...
And Saudi modernizing a little more, so maybe little bits and pieces at a time.
And let's hope China has the same thing.
Like you said, light one candle at a time?
One at a time, yep.
Well, thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Joy.
Appreciate it. Thank you to our listeners. And you can subscribe, share, and comment on our YouTube and Rumble channels. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Substack. You can listen to your favorite audio podcast on either Apple or Android devices. Please consider becoming a member of the ASCF for $100 a year. That also includes a paid subscription to Substack worth $80. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joy.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and join us again next time for our Peace Through Strength podcast.